The hospital ward smelled of disinfectant and sorrow. Machines beeped in quiet rhythm, the kind of rhythm that felt more like a countdown than a lifeline. On the far side of the room, a little girl named Emily lay on a narrow hospital bed, her body motionless from the neck down. Only her eyes moved wide, terrified, darting toward the ceiling whenever her chest tightened. Her mother, Clara, sat at her bedside, gripping her tiny hand, whispering encouragement no child should ever need to hear. "Breathe, baby. Please just breathe," Clara begged, her voice cracking like glass under pressure. Emily's lips trembled. With the little strength she had left, her weak voice slipped through, so faint it was almost carried away by the humming machines. "Please, Mommy. I can't breathe." Clara froze. Her blood turned to ice. Those words tore through her heart like a blade. She pressed the emergency button again and again, shouting for a nurse, but no one came fast enough. Panic filled the sterile air. Nurses rushed in seconds later, but seconds felt like hours to Clara. They adjusted tubes, checked monitors, whispered to each other in technical codes a mother could not understand. Clara's tears streamed, her body shaking. She wanted answers. Why her daughter had been perfectly healthy just months ago, and now lay paralyzed, unable to even draw her next breath without a struggle. The doctor entered, his face tight with stress. He leaned over Clara and spoke with the clinical calm that only made her heart break more. "Mrs. Carter, her lungs are weakening. Without advanced treatment, her chances of survival will continue to decline." Advanced treatment. A phrase Clara had come to hate. Because advanced meant expensive. It meant money she didn't have. It meant hope locked away behind a paywall. Clara worked 2 jobs. She'd sold her car, her wedding ring, everything she could, yet she was still far from the impossible number the hospital demanded for Emily's specialized care. Every night she prayed, pleaded, even screamed into the darkness, begging God for a miracle. And tonight, in the middle of Emily's gasping whispers, that miracle walked into the ward. The door swung open with a sharp metallic sound, and in stepped a man surrounded by 2 assistants. His presence filled the space instantly. His suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes polished like mirrors. He was the kind of man who didn't walk into a room. He owned it the moment he crossed the threshold. Jonathan Reed, a millionaire businessman feared by rivals, envied by allies. He was here not because of family, not because of compassion, but because of business. He'd come to discuss a hospital project with the board. Yet as he passed the ward, something pulled him to look inside. Something in Clara's screams, something in Emily's faint voice. Emily's words echoed again. "Please, Mommy, I can't breathe." Jonathan stopped dead in his tracks. His assistants urged him on, but his eyes locked on the sight in front of him, the child's pale face, the desperate mother clutching her hand, the hopelessness that wrapped the room like a shroud. Clara noticed him. She didn't know who he was, didn't care. She only saw a man standing there while her daughter suffocated. Her instincts as a mother took over. She shouted, her voice filled with both rage and desperation. "Help her. Please, somebody help my baby." For the first time in years, Jonathan Reed felt something stir inside his chest. He had spent decades building empires, crushing competitors, counting profits, but in that moment, all the numbers in his head went silent. All he could hear was the small, fragile cry of a child who could barely cling to life. And then, something inside him snapped. When the doctors began muttering again about costs, about protocols and funding approval, Jonathan's voice thundered through the ward like a storm. "Stop!" he roared, his face dark with fury. Everyone froze. The nurses, the doctors, even Clara stared at him in shock. "Stop talking about money. Stop talking about approvals. This is a child." Jonathan's voice shook the room. He pointed at the doctor. "Do whatever it takes to save her. I don't care what machine, what specialist, what treatment. Do it now and send the bill to me." Silence, utter silence. The only sound was the faint beeping of Emily's monitor and Clara's sobs. Clara couldn't believe it. A stranger, this powerful, commanding man, had just demanded that her daughter's life be saved, as if money were no longer a wall, but a tool he could toss aside like paper. Emily blinked slowly, her tiny lips parting, trying to understand through the haze of fear. Her eyes met Jonathan's, and for the first time in a long time, a flicker of hope shimmered. Clara gripped her daughter's hand tighter, tears rolling down her cheeks. She whispered, "Did you hear that, baby? You're going to be okay. You're going to live." Jonathan stood tall, his jaw set like steel. He wasn't used to being a savior, he was used to being a conqueror. But tonight, standing in that hospital ward, he had taken on a different role. Not a millionaire, not a businessman, but a man who had decided that no child should have to beg for air. As the nurses scrambled, as the doctors finally moved with urgency, Jonathan's voice still echoed through the ward. A voice of command, a voice of defiance against despair, a voice that had just changed the course of one little girl's fragile life. And yet none of them knew the story was only beginning, because saving a life was one thing, healing hearts, breaking walls, and facing the past. That was something even Jonathan Reed wasn't prepared for. The ward transformed overnight. Machines rolled in, specialists were called from across the city, and for the first time in weeks, the doctors treated Emily not like a hopeless case, but like a life worth saving, because now there was someone powerful enough to silence the whispers of too expensive. Jonathan Reed stood in the corner, his sharp suit untouched by the chaos, but his heart strangely unsettled. He had spent years in boardrooms where every decision was measured by profit. Yet here he had made a choice without calculation. Why this child? Why tonight? Emily's tiny chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance. Clara sat at her bedside through the night whispering prayers. When she glanced at Jonathan, she saw not just a millionaire, but something more, a man carrying invisible scars. By morning, Emily's breathing had steadied. The specialists approached Jonathan with cautious optimism. "She has a chance now," the lead doctor said. "We'll need months of rehabilitation, advanced therapy, but it's possible." Clara broke down in tears, clutching her daughter's hand, whispering thanks again and again. She turned to Jonathan, her voice trembling. Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us." Jonathan looked at her, his jaw tight. He didn't answer immediately. He simply stared at Emily, watching her fragile body fight for life. Then quietly he said, "Because once, I begged the same way, and no one listened." The room went silent. Jonathan rarely spoke of his past. Few knew he had grown up in poverty, watching his little sister struggle with an illness they couldn't afford to treat. He had stood helpless, just like Clara. As doctors turned away, as money decided life and death, his sister hadn't survived. The memory haunted him, fueling his empire. His hunger for success, but it had never healed the wound inside. Now, standing in front of Emily, he felt as though fate had given him one more chance, not to bring his sister back, but to save a child who still had hope. Clara's eyes softened with understanding. She reached out, touched his arm gently, and whispered, "Then tonight, you didn't just save her. You saved yourself." Jonathan turned away, his throat tightening. He wasn't used to gratitude. He wasn't used to emotion. But something inside him shifted. Days turned into weeks. Emily began her therapy, slowly regaining strength. Each day she whispered less about not being able to breathe, and more about wanting to run, to play, to laugh again. Her determination inspired everyone in the ward. Even Jonathan found himself returning, sitting quietly in the corner watching her progress. Emily, with the innocence only a child could carry, began calling him Uncle John. At first he resisted, but soon he found himself smiling, a rare, genuine smile. One afternoon, Emily reached for his hand. Her tiny fingers curled around his and she said, "Thank you for hearing me when I cried." Jonathan froze. Those words struck deeper than any business victory ever had. In that moment, he realized that all the wealth in the world meant nothing compared to the sound of a child's laughter, the sparkle in her eyes, the breath in her lungs. Clara, standing nearby, whispered, "Sometimes money doesn't just build empires, it saves lives. And tonight you proved that hearts are stronger than walls." Jonathan didn't answer. He simply looked at Emily, his eyes wet with something he hadn't felt in years, peace. And so, the man who once believed power was measured in numbers discovered a new truth. The greatest wealth is found in compassion.